My name is Lorraine Morris, and I'd like to tell you David's story. If I were a cynical person, I'd say I've been invited to provide the human interest angle. Fair enough, I can cope with that, for if my appearing on this programme serves to reinforce the tragedy of being unaware of the drugs issue facing us all today, then it will have been worthwhile. And I'll be helping myself come to terms with what has been the most devastating experience of my life, the death of my son, David. He died aged 15 on the 11th of June 1994 of butane intoxication after inhaling a can of lighter gas. Let me tell you about David. He was the youngest of my 3 boys, and being the youngest, he loved the company of others. His big brothers remember him as the one who always climbed the highest trees, skied the fastest, and talked the most. He was a lovely lad and a very popular boy. It was a standing joke in our house that the phone never stopped ringing for David. On Monday, the 30th of May, the phone rang, not for David, but about David. It was his school. He had admitted smoking cannabis at lunchtime the previous Friday in woods adjacent to the school. The local police had been called, and he had been strip searched and was now excluded. A decision about his future would be made the following week. I was utterly devastated. David had broken the law and was now having to pay the consequences. After my initial anger at his stupidity, I calmed down and looked at the situation rationally. This was perhaps the shock that would set him on the right road. As requested by the school as a condition of his readmission, I sought counselling for him and arranged an appointment with Aberdeen Drugs Action for Monday, the 13th of June. Sadly, he never made it. His school friends never saw him back at school again. Ironically, David and I enjoyed his period of exclusion, his punishment, extended to 2 weeks. We were really talking and relating to one another. I was realistic enough to appreciate that this was the mid-90s, so unfortunately, this teenage stage he was going through had inevitably involved drugs. But what I was totally ignorant of was his involvement in volatile substance abuse. For me, solvent abuse conjured up images of glue sniffers in the 1980s in inner-city deprived areas. I had no idea that this was a seriously outdated picture, and there was now a wide range of everyday household products containing butane, such as air fresheners, deodorants, hairsprays, dry cleaning fluids, Tipex thinners, and of course lighter gas, which could be abused. I was completely unaware that David and others had been buying cans of lighter gas locally and inhaling them to achieve a high, aerosols far more lethal than any glue. With the benefit of hindsight, he had all the signs of solvent abuse, yet they were, for the most part, indistinguishable from normal adolescent behaviour. Moodiness, lethargy, secretiveness. I could explain away his lack of appetite. He'd been eating too much junk at school. His headaches, well, his eyes needed testing again. The odd chemical smell, it was all tinkering with his old motorbike. All the signs. What I was also totally unaware of was a previous incident of solvent abuse at his school involving other children several months previously. The school had decided to give it a low profile, like every other school in the region would have done. Although they informed the parents of the children involved, no information was disseminated to other parents. Although the school directly contacted the local shop supplying the lighter gas and informed the police, it appears the local police took no action. and didn't visit the shop to warn the shopkeeper that he could be committing an offence by continuing to supply the gas to children. I was vaguely aware of a drugs awareness evening held locally. I didn't attend. It wasn't relevant to my family. Apparently, at that meeting, a schoolgirl working in the shop concerned asked a pointed question of the police. Was she breaking the law in selling lighter gas to her contemporaries? No, she was told. Tragically, no one followed up her question. So, it was to this same shop that David persuaded his friends to go to buy the lethal can that killed him on the 11th of June. The shopkeeper obliged onto a nice little earner, thank you very much. David was enjoying himself. Legally, he was doing nothing wrong. All he knew was that he got as good a high as he got from cannabis, only this buzz was much cheaper, much more readily and conveniently obtained, and he wasn't committing an offence. He had great fun on the last day of his life. As I dropped him off at the friend's farm with his off-road motorbike, my parting words to him were, "Don't do anything daft, David." "Do you think I'm stupid?" he laughed back. "I'm in enough trouble already. See you later." At tea time, having exhausted the fun on the bike and waiting for friends to arrive off the Aberdeen train, David, with a few minutes to spare, buzzed the can of lighter gas, as any of you who smoke might light up a cigarette. He ran across the road to the station and immediately collapsed on the platform. Despite heroic efforts to revive him, David died where he had fallen, his heart unable to stand the strain of sudden exertion after the inhalation of butane, his airways frozen, and his lungs full of fluid. For me, the shock of his sudden death was compounded by the shock of my own ignorance about the problem. Me, a teacher, David's father, a GP. What has David's death taught me? That there is a real problem very close to all of us, and we ignore it at our peril. But to tackle the drugs issue properly, we as parents, teachers, youth leaders, police, and all those concerned with the welfare of young people must first educate ourselves. Get over our fear of drugs, get rid of our ignorance and complacency, and find out the facts. Talk to our young people and listen to them, not lecture. Because the more we say, don't do, the more attractive we make something in a lot of cases. We should build partnerships between parents, schools, community workers, the police, health professionals and voluntary organisations. And perhaps we should recognise that teachers and police exclusively are not always the best people to get the message across, since they represent the very authority figures against whom many adolescents like to rebel. But most importantly, we must educate our children truthfully about drugs, without scaremongering. They must be given the facts about drugs and the confidence and opportunities to develop the skills to evaluate things for themselves and make informed, balanced, healthy choices. Appropriate education programs must be funded. Resources must be found as a matter of urgency. All this will cost money. But what price do you put on a child's life? That's easy in David's case. Just about £1, the price of a can of lighter gas. Despite heroic efforts to revive him, David died where he had fallen.